Paul's letter to the Romans is a bit of a masterpiece of theology, and we could do about 1,000 sermons on this chapter. We're only going to do 9 today. Okay, come on.
And we're going to address first things first. We're going to talk about what Paul means in comparing flesh and spirit, or in today's reading, human nature and spirit. For centuries, flesh, or sarx, has been interpreted to mean that our bodies, our physical bodies, are sinful and unclean, which has had terrible implications through history.
For women, for the LGBTQ community, for all of us.
Really, yeah, for everyone. But Paul isn't talking about bodies being sinful and spirits being good. He's talking about 2 ways of being human. The way of the flesh is organized around self-protection and almost always leads to domination and power over. And the way of the spirit is organized around love and service and power with. One way inevitably leads to death. The other leads toward life. And it brings us to a place where we aren't afraid of God, but instead we joyfully call God Abba, as a child joyfully embraces a parent.
With that thought of God as Abba, as mommy, as daddy, Paul is telling us then in no uncertain terms that serving God is not like serving Caesar or Zeus.
Or Washington, or Wall Street.
When people serve power, they live in misplaced hope of reward or in constant fear of retribution. Serving God is living in love and trust and assurance, is joining in union with the one who created this world and who is redeeming it day by day by day. And let's be honest, the world needs some redeeming right now. It's a mess out there. And when I'm really honest, I know it's a mess in here. I realize that things are not the way they ought to be.
When Paul writes, I consider that what we suffer at the present time cannot be compared at all with the glory that is going to be revealed to us, he probably had in mind the brutal oppression of the Roman Empire and the early persecution of the infant church. But those words have resonated throughout history whenever people have faced hard times, because let's face it, there have always been hard times for people of faith, for all people. So these words have been cherished over the years by those experiencing the epidemics, the invasions, the horrors of slavery, the crushing oppression that always visits those who are on the bottom side of the social or the economic ladder.
These words of Paul resonate especially in our time and our place, with those in the LGBTQ community whose rights are being stripped away, by the immigrant communities whose very lives are being taken from their families, by homeless folk facing an existence with fewer and fewer services, by the poor whose safety nets are removed and who find the odds stacked against them, by those with power and wealth and privilege. What Paul calls the suffering of the present time is great. And to borrow again from Paul's words, we all wait with eager longing for God's redemption.
I don't know about you, but some days my eager longing for God's redemption is so strong that I can't even listen to the news or can't even read Heather Cox Richardson's morning posts because it all just feels like too much.
But while Barb and I were wrestling our way through Paul's dense prose in Romans 8, we noticed something that I'd always kind of skimmed over before. And it's this: all of creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. Which I used to just think was lovely. But then I realized what a radical thing he was saying. It's not just that creation waits. What is it waiting for? And it's what Paul says is not waiting for. Paul doesn't say creation is waiting for God to wave a magic wand and make everything better. He doesn't say creation is waiting for history to magically resolve itself. He says creation is waiting for the children of God to be revealed. Paul says that God, or creation rather, is waiting for us. Think about that for a second. For ordinary people of faith like us to truly live as children of God. Now, we are connected to the Jewish tradition that has long imagined that the world's redemption somehow depends on God's people actually becoming God's people. One rabbinic saying jokes that if every Jewish person kept one Sabbath perfectly, the Messiah would come. And as the rabbis let us know, it ain't happened yet. But the theological truth behind it is profound. God intends to heal the world through a people shaped by God's love. For us as Christians, people shaped by the rabbi from Nazareth.
This image of the revealing of the children of God imagines a redemption of the world where every person of faith and goodwill lives in union with God and God's will for the world. It ain't happened yet, but it's what we await with eager longing. That's our hope. And it's hope in something we imagine because we've not seen it yet. We've seen glimpses, maybe. And that's what makes it hope, after all. We hope for what we do not see.
Last week, Barb and I were blessed by the opportunity to go see 2 plays on Broadway. Death of a Salesman with Nathan Lane and Laurie Metcalf. Amazing performances.
Angelical Ball. Jellicle Ball, which was an amazing performance in an entirely different way.
And both plays, it turns, I'm seeing people recognizing, other people have seen Jellicle Cats. Both plays, it turns out, are about hope. 2 wildly different takes on hope. In Death of a Salesman, the main character, Willie Loman, is an aging salesman who pins his hope on a narrow vision of the American dream, that somehow connections and appearance and perseverance and a winning personality will result in financial success and professional acclaim. As that dream for Willie continually fails to materialize and his grasping after it grows more and more desperate, his delusional expectations slowly strangle his spirit and the spirits of those around him. What may have started as hope becomes brittle and no longer life-giving. And ultimately, it ends in a death of despair. I think Paul, in Romans, would call Willie Loman's tragic arc the way of the flesh. A mind set on wealth and status and being remembered. And then, in the end, it brought only tragedy.
Jellicle Ball is about hope, too, and it could not be more different. It's a reimagining of Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical Cats, set in a gay ballroom context. A quick primer, ballroom culture evolved in the 1980s in New York among queer and trans folk, especially Black and Latino folk, who came together to support and celebrate each other at a time when they were excluded from virtually everything else, even from the more socially acceptable gay and lesbian scene. Many had been disowned by their families. They were discriminated against in schooling, in employment, and in housing if they were honest about their real selves. So Jellicle Ball takes the whimsical poetry and music of Cats and infuses it with a wild and exuberant celebration of, well, everyone. It's especially a celebration of people who have been, and still are, told they don't belong, that their genuine selves aren't welcome. Jellicle Ball isn't so much a play as it is an experience that celebrates all people just as they are, gay and straight and trans, young and old, strikingly beautiful and completely ordinary looking, celebrating everybody, literally everybody, in a 2-hour explosion of joy. Would Paul have described Jellicle Ball as the way of the Spirit? He was kind of uptight, so I'm not sure he would. But it's easily the most fun I've ever had in a theater. And by the end, my face was sore from smiling, and my throat was hoarse from cheering. And I stepped out onto 44th Street filled with hope. Hope for something I rarely experience, but that I await with eager longing. A hope for everyone and everything in all of creation to be celebrated, to be beloved, to be supported and engaged and renewed.
So, what is your eager longing? What suffering breaks your heart? What keeps you up at night? What in you is asking with the psalmist, "How long, O Lord?" Paul says that all of creation is asking the same question.
And creation isn't waiting for the powerful or the wealthy or the perfect or for God to do a miracle. Creation is waiting with eager longing for the children of God to be revealed.
Children of God, ordinary folk who have learned to trust God as Abba, mommy, daddy, whose lives are shaped by love rather than fear, who choose power with rather than power over.
Creation is waiting for ordinary people who feed someone, who welcome someone, who stand beside someone, who forgive someone, who protect someone, and who celebrate someone.
And every time God's children live like God's children, creation catches another glimpse of the world it has been longing for. Paul says we hope for what we do not yet see. Paul's right. We don't see it completely. But we've been given enough glimpses to know that God's world is possible.
We've seen glimpses among it in this precious faith community, among you and your roles in the world. We've seen it in people who refuse to let fear have the last word, who are clear that love has the last word. And we saw it this week in a theater full of people celebrating lives that the world so often rejects.
Those glimpses are enough to keep us hoping. Those glimpses are enough to encourage us to keep working. For us to step with eager longing into the fullness of the freedom and the joy of the children of God. Amen.